And we'll start with a roll call. Start with you, Noah.
Noel Sanchez, Dave Caldwell.
Miguel Casado. Megan.
Megan DeSanto, legal counsel.
Robert Azar, planning staff.
And Charlotte Lipschitz, vice chair, standing in as chair tonight. I believe
Choyan's here, but he had to step out just
is
for a minute.
unlocking the door.
Yeah.
All right, so we will move into the approval of the minutes from the March 18th meeting. I believe you guys have all received them and had a chance to review. So are there any questions or should we have a motion to approve?
Move to accept the minutes.
Second.
Okay, we'll do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So the minutes are approved. Any nays? Any
No.
abstentions? No, we're good. So moving into the director's report.
Okay, just a little update about zoning changes. So I think, gosh, trying to remember when we were here last. The zoning changes, the first phase of zoning changes coming out of the comprehensive plan were approved. They were signed by the mayor. They have been fully codified into the zoning ordinance. So if you go online to the city's zoning page, you'll find the new text of the ordinance. You'll find the PDFs of the zoning maps, and also the interactive GIS map has been updated. Thanks very much to Lev Simon for doing all of that work. It's a lot, and he did a great job of it. So that and we are already seeing applications come in to take advantage of a lot of these new regulations. So we've now started working on the next phase, and we've got some draft documents that we've been working on specifically with respect to parking, to student housing, and design regulations. So we'll be vetting those internally and with the mayor's office and with the city council over probably the next month. It's possible that we'll have something to talk to you in May about that, but I don't want to make any promises yet.
Okay. So moving into agenda item number 1, this is referral number 3592, the tolling of variances for downtown service parking lots. Go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Madam Chair. I'll give a quick introduction.
Turn your mic up a little bit.
Yeah, so thanks. This is a request to amend the ordinance, particularly Article 604.G.4.H of the ordinance, and this would pertain to downtown parking lots that are operating through variances granted by the Zoning Board of Review. So this amendment would toll the validity of those variances until December 31st, 2029. They were previously in effect till December 31st, 2024, and the applicant wishes to extend that validity up till the 31st of December, 2029. And so the applicant's here, they can tell us more about the change.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. John Mancini, I'm an attorney with offices at 56 Pine Street, and I represent the applicant this evening or this afternoon, specifically PRI 14 LLP. And this is an ordinance that was initially proposed by this applicant and several other applicants back in early part of 2020 and was passed in the height of the COVID. And the purpose of the ordinance was to extend certain parcels of real estate within the town, within the city, that are currently used for parking, but are used as parking because of variances. In other words, they're not permitted by right under the zoning code. So as a result, these parking lots are either recognized by way of a variance or they're existing in contravention of the zoning ordinance. And at that time, we felt that because of the market, if you will, with regards to office space and the kind of uncertainty that was going on, we wanted to memorialize by way of an ordinance the ability for these property owners to have more time, if you will, to find development proposals or find ways to either bring their property into compliance or develop them in lieu of using those properties as parking spaces. The ordinance did expire on December 31st, 2024. And the applicant here, the petitioner, is the property owner for property which is located on Fountain Street and specifically at the corner of Fountain and Broadway. It was, and as we Rhode Islanders are familiar with, we talk about things that were in the past. This is the parcel that used to be the old Providence Police Station. And this developer has a agreement with PRA to develop this parcel, but to develop specifically for the purpose of office space. The developer and PRA and the city have always believed that this parcel is a very unique parcel because of where it's situated. And the goal has been to essentially make it a gateway into Providence coming from the western section of the city. The developer unfortunately has not been able to obtain a proposal or to develop an office building that would be worthy enough for the use of this parcel. So since that time, since it's acquired the parcel and since it's reached an agreement with PRA, it's used it primarily for parking. And the parking is incidental to an accessory use for not only the AMP, but the Hilton Hotel, as well as other users. So it's not a parking that exists, it's not a parking lot exclusive to any property that's specifically and particularly owned by this petitioner, but one that's utilized as parking in general. And what the petitioner is asking is for the existing tolling statute to be essentially reignited to allow it another period of 5 years from commencing December 31st, 2024 to December 31st, 2029, to allow for an opportunity to further develop it. Also, keep in mind, this developer has been responsible. The developer has maintained continuous contact with the city, with PRA, giving them information and informing them as to what some of the anticipated proposals have been. They've looked at this parcel for development to allure new businesses to the town, to the city, and also to maintain some existing tenants, one of which they've been actively engaging in trying to utilize for this parcel, but it just hasn't come to fruition. So again, we're just simply asking for another opportunity to continue to utilize the parcel as parking, and to, in the meantime, to continue the development process.
Madam Chair.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? All right,
Madam Chair, I can give a little bit more context on this. So this is kind of an interesting provision of an ordinance because it relates to variances that had been granted. You should know that this is not the only parking lot that falls into this category. We know of at least two others, one on Weybosset Street, one on Pine Street. It used to be a practice of the Zoning Board of Review to grant use variances for parking lots in downtown. And when they did this, they would often put a time fuse on the variances. And this had been a practice that had gone on for a number of years. But in recent years, the zoning board has, I believe, I can't say exactly why, but they've stopped granting these types of variances, and they've stopped granting variances that have time limits on them. So the only recourse for these property owners is to actually get something into the zoning ordinance, and that's why they're here. If any of you were thinking, well, why don't they just go back to the zoning board and ask for a variance? That path is foreclosed.
So is the intent, to allow time for a different kind of development? Or, well, the closing of that to kind of push them to develop it differently?
I think that was the idea, that these, I think the original intent of the original zoning variances was that, you know, perhaps, there aren't beneficial uses for these properties at the moment, but in the case that there may be sometime in the future, they wanted to kind of keep the property owners on a bit of a short leash, and not just give them an open-ended, variance. And that was the intent behind this more recent ordinance amendment. It has exactly the same effect, which is to allow them to use these properties as parking lots for a period of time that comes to an end. And the hope is that there will be a beneficial use, that materializes.
And I think, you had said that, you'd made some presentations to the PRA.
Yeah,
Potentially.
we did, not so much presentations to the PRA, but what we've done is, yeah, we've kept them informed. So this is a parcel that is of interest to the PRA. We received it from the PRA. The agreement with the PRA is to develop it for office space. I think both parties, the petitioner, the owner of the property, PRA, the city, has concluded that this is a great spot, or this is a conducive spot for office, and they want to use it for office. There just hasn't been the proposal that they were looking for, the type of magnitude that would be necessary to develop a large scale office building on this site.
And does the PRA have any jurisdiction and may be able to change that?
So the PRA definitely has the ability to have an effect on what can be built there. And I will say that I don't know if this particular property owner has, and maybe we could ask if they've approached the PRA and asked for more flexibility in how the property could be used for, let's say, for residential, for example. I have a sense that if they did, the PRA would be amenable to that. I don't think certainly zoning doesn't restrict that parcel to just office. And while office might be theoretically the best use for that, I don't think that that residential would be out of the question for any vacant parcels in downtown. Maybe that's a question for the applicant. Is residential any more feasible than office for this site?
And that's a good question. So from the developer's perspective, we don't think that this parcel lends itself to residential. I think it's more of a office building. Can we do residential on the parcel? Yes. Is residential consistent with the surrounding area and part of the fabric of that section of Providence? Yes. But this developer is focused on maintaining it as an office building, and that's been the goal. And that's been the primary discussion it's had with PRA. We haven't approached PRA with the proposal of a residential, 100% residential, but we would be open-minded to a mixed use, a type of residential with office, with retail. But again, the driving factor is the office part of it. And so we don't want to make this the tail wagging the dog where it's residential built for purposes of hoping that office comes. We want it to be the opposite, where it's office with residential being a small component of it, but the residential wouldn't be enough to drive the development, because this is gonna be a large scale development. And this is the developer that's already done hotels and has done other residential downtown. So it's not like it's not something that they can't do or don't want to do. It's just something that doesn't fit the fabric of what they want to do for that spot.
Bob, maybe you can talk a little bit, because I think this affects 3 parking lots in terms of setting a precedent, but we're really only talking about one here, so.
Yeah, I mean, we have, the petitioner is the owner of one of the parking lots. The other petitioners are not here, or the owners of the other parking lots are not here. So they can't speak for themselves on this. You know, I guess, you know, all due respect, I mean, if you can develop this lot, you should develop it. I don't know why you should hold out for, you know, an office building if there's no market for office. We all understand there's no market for office. And there are, I guess the question is, could you build anything? I think that's always the standard when it comes to like a use variance, and you're essentially extending a use variance. So could you build something there? And if no, why not?
Yeah, I understand that point. I'm gonna have Mike Vacola from the applicant, address that point, because he's been in discussions with PRA, so he knows it better.
Do I need to be sworn in?
No,
Great. I can say anything I want then, right?
no.
The reason we were attracted to this site was twofold. It came with the Fogarty building. We bought it from the PRA through another party, including the Fogarty building, which you know now has been developed into the residence inn, and it's been very successful. We also built the tower that's currently adjacent to the Omni Hotel, which is a residential building. So we're not adverse to residential. But we were attracted to this particular site for a variety of reasons. First, it's on a very high elevation compared to the rest of downtown. Anything that's built there is going to have a commanding view of the city. Secondly, it's got liberal zoning that underlies it. We can go corner to corner and maximize the footprint and go up, I believe, 300 feet. So that would be approximately 26, 27 stories. And it begs for a signature office building. And companies that are looking for signature office buildings want to be the exclusive tenant. They want to have a building with their name on it, and they want to have visibility from and access to the interstate highway. That's exactly what this site has. To do something other than a signature building on it would be, pardon the expression, a bastardization of the quality of that site. It requires and it begs for a signature office building. Is there one coming to Providence? Not anytime soon, apparently. We had made a play for Roger Williams University. We had made a play for Hasbro, naturally, several plays for Hasbro. And we looked at other developments. Could we put residential there, an exclusively residential building? Yes. Has anybody here built a vertical residential tower? Probably not. I did. I can tell you it isn't inexpensive. In order to make a building vertical, residential, the rates would have to be significantly higher than the per square foot per month rate at the highest apartment takes in Providence. Now, and you can't put affordable units in there because it's very expensive to go vertical. So we're in a position now of wanting to preserve that site for the one time the doorbell rings in Providence and someone says, you have a signature site that fits all of those qualities. But for this site, this city does not. And to use this site for any other reason would be throwing a potential opportunity out the window. Now, believe me when I tell you, this is the world's most expensive parking lot. We're not making a dime on it. We're barely covering our costs. But it's important to us to preserve the availability of that site so that when someone comes knocking at the door, we have the product for them. Let's not be short-sighted about this. Let's make sure that we're willing to hold it. And by the way, it provides a service to the city by providing surface parking for the AMP, for the convention center, for all of the things that go on downtown. And thankfully, there are more and more things going on downtown than ever before. Brings in more people, they can park there. But be that as it may, we feel very strongly that this is an absolute Class A plus site, and it needs to be preserved so that when someone wants a building in Providence, and I hope that day is soon, we have exactly the site that checks off every box that any site selector could possibly want. No other site in Providence has that. And that's why we're asking you to allow us the time to continue to mitigate our holding costs with the few parking that we get in order to facilitate the inevitable development of that site as a true signature building.
Okay, why don't we hear the staff report?
All right, thanks, Madam Chair. And Commissioners, we did review the application. We feel that this extension would provide the petitioners with sufficient time to explore opportunities to develop plans for the lots. So based on that, we recommend that you make a positive recommendation to the City Council to allow for tolling of these variances until the 31st of December 2029. And the amendment should be updated to indicate that the tolling would be in effect, retroactively be in effect from December 31st, 2024.
Okay, so this is a public meeting. We've received a few letters already. These have been reviewed by the commissioners. If you're here in person, I believe we have a sign-up sheet. And if you're online, or joining us virtually, please raise your hand, which is the middle button within your screen, or press *9 if you're joining us by phone. So here in person, we have Ethan Kaya.
You guys can.
Yeah, and commissioners, you did receive a letter from him that was forwarded to you today.
Am I going?
Yes, as.
Oh,
Wait, is that,
oh, no, this.
does that guy wanna comment?
I don't know, he didn't listen.
Okay. You wanna do-
Oh, sure. We also have Julian Smith signed up, but without a agenda item number.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Not for this,
Not
item.
for this.
Okay.
Got
all
it,
right.
okay.
Yes, so I did also submit the written testimony as said, but here just to iterate over some points, I also wanted to hear what the petitioner's representation had to say. So a couple of points is, as the petitioner said, is right now the site is vacant. They've had so far 4 years according to this ordinance to find a proposal that they think fits. This would grant them another 5 years, if I'm correct. They say they want to reserve it for a big office building. That I have no problem with big office buildings, but reserving that land that is otherwise valuable, holding out for this one tenant that might come one day, seems a little dumb, to be honest. Not from a profitability standpoint, I'm sure it's very profitable for them to do that, but from a resident standpoint, who has to walk by that lot every day when it could instead be something like a nice mixed-use building. It could include commercial or residential, even office. It could, it doesn't have to be a tower. I understand the site might be good for that. It doesn't have to be a tower, it could be a more modest building. And in building anything on that land, it is going to bring more tax money to the city that it can use for other services. Right now, the lot's considered vacant as far as I'm aware, because it doesn't have any permanent buildings on it. Therefore, I believe it also receives lower tax rate. I might be wrong on that. If residential and commercial were on there, you'd be getting much more tax from it to be used for the city. Additionally, it would help improve the character of the neighborhood. There is already residential right next to it. I don't remember the development name, but there is several residential buildings right next to it, as well as the library and the hotel and near AMP. So it is a very nice location for that kind of thing. And as mentioned, the ordinance that would be updated by this amendment would apply to multiple properties. We're only hearing from one here. So even though I think there are plenty of reasons not to recommend this amendment, I would say that if it is recommended, it should not be for a 4-year timeline. It should maybe be 1 or 2 years. If they're holding out for a proposal, this land is sitting unused. Let's make sure that we keep an eye on it and it's not sitting there forever. And it should also, the amendment should also include some wording specific for this parcel. So we're not allowing the tolling to continue for parcels that are not here to present their, their reasoning for needing it to be parking. Thank you. Questions or should I?
I think you can sit ahead, yeah. So I think that was everyone we have in the room. Do we have anyone online? All right. So we all want this to be developed in some shape or form. I think that's clear. I guess the question is, do we think it's worth giving them an extra 4 years to
But
figure it out? Yeah, 5 years.
I think that's the only question. And I thought about that and hearing the testimony as well. It's like, do we give a shorter period of time? But also the intent of going over this is to not have to every 2-3 years renewing these variances. What's realistic? I mean, we can say a shorter time to get an update on plans and what they've seen and then maybe push for another use at that time, or at least have the option to do that. But what would be a time? What, 3 years? I don't think anything less than that would be.
Yeah, I mean,
Feasible.
I'm sensitive to the fact that if they don't have a plan now, it takes a while to get a plan in place. And so less than 3 years seems wildly unrealistic to me. I guess I don't know what happens if we don't, if this isn't extended. I mean, we're just recommending something to the city council, so.
Yeah, if the city council doesn't approve this, then the parking lots can get cited and they would have to remove the parking use.
So they would just be vacant,
They would
really
be,
used
they
for
would be
nothing.
vacant,
Yeah,
yeah.
got it.
And keep in mind that because we're in downtown, there's some pretty rigorous rules about what development has to look like. So you couldn't really just put up like a temporary one-story building or something
Right.
like that.
Which makes, you know, the number of years even kind of more sensitive because to go through that review process also takes time.
Or you could push the structured park, which I think was one of the options, which now will be adding, is that, do we really wanted to go that route? Cause that would be, I guess, the quickest.
Yeah, I mean,
Thing to do.
I think that the challenge right now is that, even as we do have high demand for housing in particular, let's even imagine that the developers wanted to put housing on these parcels. The fact remains that the costs are high, and while the rents are high, the rents have to justify the costs. And we've seen very little new residential construction in downtown, and anything that's been built has been built with considerable subsidy. So it's not like if they wanted to, they could just build something quickly. I think if that was the case, we'd see a lot more housing being built in downtown than we do. So it is, a bit of kicking the can down the road.
I mean, I also think it's fair. Yes, there was a 4-year extension, but 2 of those years were kind of the thick of the pandemic, so it wasn't like really new. It was kind of hard to formulate a plan because we really know where we were. So it's not like they got a full 4 years. And I think it's still uncertain now because of everything else going on right now. It's kind of hard to plan. And no one knows what construction material is going to cost, like what labor is going to be like. I mean, it's pretty challenging, I'm sure. Dave knows that better than anyone else, so.
Yeah, in the landscape of construction, 5 years is not actually so long. I mean, it might be reasonable, I guess, but we would hope to see a plan sooner than that.
Well, actually, I don't know if we could.
I don't know if we can put in place a clause saying, have a plan in place within 3 years.
We can't get applying to all the lots, right? It kind of puts us in a.
Well, I mean, you can make any recommendation you want. You're advising the city council. And, if you want, you could require some sort of reporting. you probably don't want this to just be for free. You know, maybe there is some kind of,
Like preliminary plan submission.
yeah, something.
I would be fine with
Yeah,
that.
I think what it feels like is we're just giving a blank, you know,
Right.
to not, well, to not do anything with it, just let it sit there another
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah,
That's what it feels like. The change in the ordinance will do, not just for this property, but for any other properties, like, well, we can be a parking lot for the next 5 years.
yeah,
And then we'll think about it after that. Which is what we don't wanna do. We wanna encourage them to continue to think about it with a deadline that is coming.
yeah.
That might have some effect.
So what if we said, within 3 years? Or like, put it, 3 years from today, they would have to have some type of preliminary plan that's submitted and reviewed, applied to all the lots. So they would be
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
notified that
Right.
this is a new one.
Basically, a submission of a development plan. I don't know who
Right.
that submission goes
It would go to the Downtown Design Review Committee,
Okay,
but it would be preliminary plan. They use the same terminology.
okay, so it'd be a preliminary plan submission to the
Yeah.
Downtown Design Review Committee. By, I think, well, 3 years from
24, so
24 would be
so
27,
by December 31st of 2027.
yeah,
Will this apply to all the lots?
Yeah, it would have to.
I think it would have to.
And then if that is not done, will the tolling cease from that day forward? Or is it more, is it more,
So, and
aspirational?
so if we say, so I guess, will we say something like ending by then with a 2-year extension if they if they submit it? So
So it'd be a
3
3-year
years
extension
plus 2. Yeah,
now with a 2-year, possibility of a 2-year extension from 12/31/27 based on a preliminary plan submission to the Downtown Design Review Committee.
Or would you say a 5-year extension with the caveat that we'd like to see something in 3 years?
isn't that as much cheaper, right?
Yeah, I would, well, I'll leave it to you guys to someone to make a motion, on one of those, but personally, I think the first one seems more, actionable.
That might have been a question for the attorney, how we word this. Because we're asking for two things here.
Right, I mean, it depends on what this commission wants to recommend, if this is more of a nudge or, something more, if you're recommending something more finite, in order for the tolling to be in place. So you could recommend, extension of the 5-year tolling period with a recommendation that the city council, strongly encourage them to submit plans within 3 years, or you could do something more, with more legal consequence, which would say something like, we recommend tolling for 3 years, and they'll be entitled to an additional 2 years if, preliminary plans are submitted for review, by the conclusion of the first 3 years. So those are, it really just depends on how much you're trying to encourage this. And again, it's a recommendation to the council, so they could, do something differently if they wanted to.
I think we should, go with the stronger language, it'll force them to look at the potential plans, and I think it also addresses testimony here as well as the 2 letters that we received. So,
So it would be a motion to recommend to the city council, to make a positive recommendation for the tolling for 3 years until, December 31st, 2027, with the possible extension of 2 years to December 31st, 2029. If the applicant submits a preliminary plan to the Downtown Design Review Committee
Within the first 3 years.
within the first 3 years.
And they'll be entitled to it, so it'll be an automatic. Just change the language to entitled so that it's an automatic extension if they submit within 3 years. Not
Yes,
eligible.
sorry, okay,
Because they
so,
would-
yes, so reword this.
I don't mean to interrupt you, I just
Yeah.
wanted to point out, that we'll give them an opportunity for response.
Sure,
If I could just clarify, I think you understand that when you use the word preliminary plan, it has a significant meaning to, which would include that the applicant would have to present engineered plans, a preliminary plan, as opposed to if we did conceptual master plans. So 3 years, 2 years is not really adequate time for the developer to find a proposal and to engineer it sufficient to present for preliminary plan. I just want you to be made aware of that. I mean, I think that the time period that we chose in 5 years is an important period because it gives us a little more runway. I mean, I think one of the important points, and I think one of the members made, is that the first extension of 4 years, even if it was 5 years, really, a lot of that was eaten up by COVID. And there wasn't much going on in the first 2 years between 2020 and 2022 that would have lent itself to give us a proposal that we could then sink our teeth into and develop and submit it to the board. So I just think that that's something that I want the board to be made aware of, because it could be a fool's mission to try to think that we can develop something within 3 years and have preliminary plans. If we did that, we'd have to find somebody within the next year or so.
Madam Chair. So just looking at the requirements for preliminary plan for submission to the Downtown Design Review Committee. A set of scaled architectural plans of the proposed new construction. They have to indicate the scale. There has to be a site plan with building setbacks, landscape features, paved areas, parking areas, etc. Floor plans, roof plans, exterior elevations, axonometric or perspective plans, and exterior material and color samples. That's what's required for preliminary plan submission.
okay, and is there?
Not engineering.
There's no
plans.
engineering and there's no plan submission before preliminary plan, that is.
That's
the
correct.
first
That's
step
the
in
first
review
step. This is
process.
development plan review, following the new rules under state law.
Okay, so do we think that's realistic within 3 years, or do we think that's a 5-year process or a 4-year process?
Defer to you, especially more than that.
I agree, they would have to hit the ground running
Right.
to come up with a development plan, like, right away. 3 years would be a real charge to go ahead.
So are we thinking the conceptual plan would be a suitable alternative?
Well, it sounds like
There's
there's
nothing-
not a conceptual
Yeah,
plan
yeah, but we-
submission.
We're right now talking about doing whatever we want in a manner of speaking. So that's kind of where we're making things up here a little bit ourselves. So can we ask that or no?
You could, I mean, there is sort of like a pre-application. That the DRC uses from time to time. It's like a non-binding kind of a discussion. I mean, that's a possibility.
I would personally be fine with that
Mhm.
pre-app concept. I don't think that's a big lift. Just to say, hey, you're doing something after 3 years. Show me something. What do you think?
What do you think, Miguel?
Sounds good. I don't know how do you.
I mean, I think that would be more realistic and also able to push a little bit more. I mean, just in small residential, sometimes spend 2 or 3 years trying to figure it out, so. something large like that, but at least if there's a concept, I think my concern is that there would be some movement as opposed to just, well, let the property sit there until something happens. But we'd rather want to, and that's why I asked if the PRA had any input in this particular lot, and they mentioned that they had made, I don't know, not presentations, but touch about it. And so somebody's keeping an eye on it, then, as opposed to just, I feel like there's other, maybe the other lots are just sitting there waiting for.
Are the other lots under, PRA involvement?
No,
And not that we can make development happen anyway, but as long as there's movement of some sort, some intent, other than just letting them sit there. And that's what
Madam Chair, if I can offer again, so two points. One, when I said engineer plans, I think the board probably appreciates, understands, even with architectural plans, there's a significant amount of work they'll have to go into it. I mean, the geotech study there alone to uphold a 28-story building is not an easy feat. And to engineer that, to present architectural plans is gonna call for some type of engineering regarding that. So that's why we have some hesitation with regards to submitting a preliminary plan, because I think we'd have to start now running towards that goal. But I'm not opposed to keeping a leash, an annual leash on us, if you wish, to report back to either the PRA or planning that this is what we've tried to do to market the property, or this is what we've tried to do to seek some type of development on that site consistent with what we think is plausible, and keep us in check on that. Even a pre-application is fine, but we can come and show you a pretty picture of something, but if we don't have a user, the pretty picture doesn't do much. I mean, the goal is to not even to incentivize, the goal is to keep us, because we're already incentivized to do something that we want to build, right? It's what we do. The goal is to keep us on a path towards development and keeping you informed that we're actually doing something and not using this as simply a parking spot or basically buying time to do nothing. The intent here is not to do nothing.
Okay, so the ideas on the table, or the leading idea on the table, I think, is requiring some sort of check at 3 years, and probably what that is a pre-application. But I think there's a good point, which is you can hire an architect to make a rendering and say this is a pre-application. And if that doesn't have, you know, a development strategy behind it, doesn't mean a whole lot. So we're kind of up against the fact that, as we say, we can't make development happen. But we also don't want necessarily people to be waiting for the perfect opportunity. It might be a slightly less good opportunity that presents itself more immediately. So I think that the best option that we have is requiring some sort of check at 3 years. And I think that's a pre-application, even though I understand that that's not necessarily a binding agreement or a binding plan. So in this scenario, I think what we would be recommending, it would be a motion to recommend to the city council that, I think it would be deferring to the sort of second set of language that, has been suggested, which is a motion to recommend to the city council that they, approve the proposed change, or sorry, so, extend the tolling to December 31st, 2029, and strongly encourage, the developer to submit a pre-application for, a development plan within the first 3 years of that 5-year period.
Well, not required, right?
Again, I'm not sure required is the pre-application, I'm not sure has enough teeth to be required. But if, Yes, it would be a pre-application with the DDRC.
I'll make that motion. That one.
Is that clear now? Okay.
All right, you got that.
Do we have a second?
I think so. Could we just maybe summarize that motion as easily as we can, so we all
Okay,
understand?
it would, the motion would be to recommend to the city council to extend the tolling to December 31st, 2029, and, strongly encourage the applicant to provide a pre-application for development to the, Downtown Design Review Committee within the first 3 years of that 5-year period.
I'll second that.
If I could just say, instead of the applicants, the property owners, since we don't have an applicant tonight.
Okay, the property owners.
Second, property owners.
So we'll do a voice vote, Noel,
I,
Dave,
Aye.
Miguel,
Aye,
and I say aye.
thank you, that's fair.
All right, agenda item number 2 is referral number 3593 for 14 Braman Street. And so yeah,
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Commissioners. A quick introduction. So this is a request to rezone 14 Braman Street, which is adjacent to development on, which is just adjacent to a development at 729 Hope Street. It's currently used as a parking lot, and the applicant is requesting a change to allow that area to be developed as a playground or a daycare that will be operating outside of that abutting building. And the reason they're requesting this rezoning to C2 is because daycare for 12 or more people is not permitted by right in the R3 zone where this lot is currently located. So applicants here, and they can tell us more about what they want to do.
This on, can you hear me?
Yep, just speak closer.
All right. Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Padua. 1 Park Row in Providence is my address. I represent Bessemer Realty Corporation, which is the owner of the property 729 Hope and also 14 Bayman Street. And I also represent Paper Crown Preschool LLC, who is the tenant and co-petitioner and is seeking to open a preschool at this location. It is, we're asking for a recommendation of City Council for a zone change from R3 to C2. We have the support of Councilwoman Anderbois. I spoke to her last week, and she told me she would be writing a letter of support. I followed up with her by text today, hadn't heard back whether or not that's been submitted, but she is in support of this zone change. With me, I have Julia Smith. She's the owner of the preschool. I have Dave Sisson, who's architect, and Peter Casali, zone consultant. And we're not going to go crazy, but I do want to cover what we need to cover for you. The project is to open a preschool on Hope Street, right near Rochambeau. For preschool licensing requirements, there needs to be a play area. And so the owner of the property owns the adjacent property, which is at 14 Braman Street, and that's currently a parking lot. That property, 14 Braman Street, is in an R3 zone, and 729 Hope Street is in a C2 zone. Just as a footnote, as Bob indicated to you earlier, when he gave you an update on the comprehensive plan and the updated zoning ordinance, magically, from between the time we filed this petition and today, the GIS map changed. This was a C1 zone and an R2 zone, and it became a C2 zone and an R3 zone. That makes sense. So we're requesting this zone change from an R3 to a C2, and as Choyan said, the use table requires a C2 zone for a preschool more than 12 students, which is what this will be. Which is why we're asking for the zone change to allow that use. So can we swear in the witnesses? Do you need, don't need them swearing in? Great, okay. So Julia, why don't you introduce yourself to the committee and tell them a little bit about yourself, your professional background, and your experience in owning and operating preschools.
Hi, I'm Julia Smith. I have about 18 years of experience in early childhood education. I've worked as a preschool teacher, and then I have my master's in applied behavior analysis. So I'm also a board certified behavior analyst. And I've worked about 12 years as a clinician specializing in autism. 5 years ago, I opened up my first location right on the border of North Kingstown and East Greenwich because I could not find a preschool program that met my needs as a working parent, but that also had the environment I was looking for my daughter. We filled up very quickly, despite it being in the middle of COVID, because there's just a huge need for quality childcare. I opened a second location in Portsmouth a couple years after that, and that one also filled up quickly. And we really like to bring our services to Providence. I've been trying to get a school open in the city for almost 2 years now. It's been very difficult to find a location. And we think Hope Street is perfect. It's the exact size we need. We keep the center small to really for quality control, but we do need a playground. We need it not only for, you know, our state license, but children this age, they need to get outside and play. The playground will, you know, it's gonna take up half the parking lot, maybe a little bit less. Because of that, we're not gonna have giant structures. We'll have certified playground mulch. It will be completely fenced in, but allow the other tenants in the building to still be able to access the parking lot and the dumpster. We will have, you know, sandbox of age-appropriate climbing dome, a little garden. We have gardens at our other schools right now, which are always really fun in the spring and the summer. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback from the neighbors. I walked around and, you know, passed out letters to all the neighbors, giving them my personal cell phone number and to call me if they have any concerns about us moving in and about the zone change request. I haven't heard anything, and the business owners that I've spoken to are excited for us to move in. I think they're excited for the additional foot traffic. And then we have a few families that have reached out wanting to enroll based on the letter that I sent out because there's a need for childcare in the area.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
Any questions of Julia?
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Okay. We'll move on to our next witness, Dave Sisson, who's an architect. I believe Dave has testified, not before your committee, but others, so ask that he be recognized. Ask that he be recognized as an expert, as an architectural expert.
Yes, that's
Okay.
fine.
So, David, you have a sketch, and it's not one that the commission has, but I have copies here. If I can get those to you, pass them out to people here, see what we're talking about. So, using the sketch that I just gave you, and also, you have, I think, the staff report, which has a couple of images on it. Could you talk through, site plan, play area, parking, and what's going on here?
Thank you, and I've been in front of this board before, and nice to see everybody again tonight. This is a fairly small scale project in the Hope Street neighborhood. I know this neighborhood well. I lived there for about 11 years, as very close to this location. This building's a small commercial, one-story building. The space is sort of a double storefront, I'd say. Was a bike shop for many years, and now is empty. It's been empty for a little while. The proposal is to put a small daycare and an autism clinic in the space. I believe the daycare, correct me if I'm wrong, is about 30 children in 2 classrooms, total of 30 children. So does that sound about right?
2 classrooms and then, autism side.
Correct. There are 30 children in the daycare portion. As was mentioned before, it does require a outdoor play area for the children. And we, took part of the parking lot for that. Right now, if you visit that site, it's a pretty basic parking lot. I believe about 19 parking spaces. With that said, they aren't really striped out, so it might be fewer than that. If we striped it out properly in its current configuration. Does have a couple dumpsters pushed to the back in the current configuration. And our proposal is to remove some of those parking spaces, take a portion of that, I'd say about a third of that parking lot, to be a little play area for the children. As was mentioned before, it'd be fenced. We're not talking about a play area with large toys. It's a little more freeform for that. And we do have to share access through that space for a couple of tenants to get at the dumpster, I believe. But the idea is to secure that area from the general public and of course from the cars and give the children a little play area there. Happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
So, David, just on the site plan that you have in front of you that I just passed out, you can see that the parking lot, you've enumerated 12 spaces,
Correct,
and then at the end of that parking lot, will be the dumpsters,
correct.
and then beyond that is the play area, which according to the measurements here would be about 50 feet wide and about 44 feet long.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. And then let's just look at the staff report real quick, just so they see the images. If you look at the staff report, front left, top left is the back of 729 Hope Street, and you can see the parking area and those 2 dumpsters all the way to the right. And then on the lower right image, you can see where 14 Braman Street is, and it's enumerated 50 feet wide, 100 feet long, as you can see, it's directly adjacent to 729 Hope Street in the rear.
Yeah. When you visit those, they appear as one property.
Yeah.
But they're
Right. Again, I have no more questions for Mr. Sisson. If anybody has any, we're happy to entertain them.
Commissioners, are there any questions for Mr. Sisson? All right,
Can I have you move back here from up? Now we're gonna have Peter Casali, our zoning code consultant, testify here. You testified before this board and others in Providence many times.
I have.
We have Mr. Casali recognized as an expert. Zoning code.
he is recognized.
Okay, so Peter, what was your assignment with regard to this project? What did you do? What are your findings and opinions?
So I was retained by the general contractor for the project. We had looked at a couple of properties with Julia. It was a long process. And they settled on the Hope Street project. I was retained to enact the permit process to install that. And in the plan review process with DIS staff, we discovered that the extension of the playground to the parking lot of the building, which appears to be one, was actually a separate lot and in a different zone.
So with regard to this petition for a zone change, did you review the comprehensive plan and the goals of the zoning ordinance?
I did. I found the proposed development and with that, the zone change to be consistent with the objectives of the comprehensive plan in a couple of areas. And I also found the proposal to be in tune with the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance.
Great. Any questions from the commission for Mr. Casali?
I have no questions. Do you have questions? I think we're all set.
So just to summarize, we're asking for the zone change.
Use the mic, please.
Oh.
We're asking for the zone change from R3 to C2 to allow for the use as a play area. And as you've heard the testimony, this zone change is consistent with the comprehensive plan as well as the goals of the zoning ordinance section 101. So we're asking you to make a recommendation to the city council to approve the request for zone change. Happy to answer any questions.
All right,
I have a question.
all right.
So the lot is the second one in from the corner,
Correct.
but it looks as if it goes with the building, the big building.
Correct.
And is the same owner, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, commissioners, is that it for this group?
I think so.
Okay, I think you guys are all set. Back down. Troyan, do you want to present the staff report?
Sure, I'll just go through it real quick. So commissioners, as you know, Hope Street has a mix of uses, restaurants, retail and the like. And so, given that this area is currently used for parking and is directly adjacent to the R3 zone, we feel that this rezoning would be appropriate as introduction of a play area would reduce the intensity of that lot, which is currently completely used for parking. And if you look at the future land use map of the comp plan, you'll see this is one where you have medium density residential use right up against neighborhood commercial. And we feel that this use, the rezoning to accommodate this use would be appropriate given the intent of the plan. So, however, we would say that although we don't find any negative effects in compliance with section 101 of the zoning ordinance, we would say that you should make a positive recommendation to the city council to approve the change with the condition that a footnote be added to the map to limit the use of the lot to the dimensional regulations of the R3 zone with the allowed use of a daycare center for 12 or more people, inclusive of ancillary play yards and parking that's accessory to that use.
Just, excuse me, Joanne, I think you left out the word use and dimensional regulations of the R3 zone. Just want to make sure that's clear.
Sure.
We want people to be able to build a house here someday if they want to, but not a 4-story commercial building that could be right to the lot lines.
So this is because of it's Hope Street is the commercial.
Hope Street is the
The
commercial.
commercial.
Yeah, yeah.
Corridor, and then this is the next
Yeah.
lot in, and the first one in the residential area.
Correct, and the
That's right.
intent is to kind of just maintain that boundary, so that's why we're recommending that the use of the lot be limited to the use and dimensional regulations of the R3 zone, any building that happens.
You can, I just pulled it up here. This is the lot that we're talking about. And as you can see, it's right across the street from a house. It's right next door to a house. It's got a house to the rear. So having a larger scale, commercial building extend into the block here, we think is inappropriate. But if someday somebody wanted to put a house there, that wouldn't be objectionable to us.
Would it change the setbacks and all that?
No, it would be the use and dimensional regulations of the R3 zone. That's,
So they couldn't build to the lot line?
that's right. That's right.
But that doesn't preclude anything they're showing here with the fence at the lot line and.
No,
the playground
nope,
Okay.
the playground and the ancillary parking would be expressly permitted.
Okay,
And that's what they're asking
Yeah.
for. We just don't we don't want to open the door someday to something significantly more than what they're asking for.
all right, are there more questions?
I was just gonna ask if there's any other way to make that happen without changing the zoning.
No, it would be a use variance, and as we've described previously, the zoning board is very reluctant to grant use variances. They have to make a finding, any zoning board has to make a finding that the property has lost all of its beneficial use in order to grant a use variance. So that's why they don't do it. And this just so happens to be directly adjacent to a commercial zone. This has been very standard practice for this board and for the city council to grant, to allow for zoning changes to just nudge a zone over. And we often do that with conditions because of that condition being sort of nestled on three sides by residential zoning.
All right, this is a public meeting, so is there anyone in the room? We don't have anyone in the room who would like to comment. Is there anyone online? If you're online joining us virtually, raise your hand or press *9 if you're on the phone.
Hold on just a sec here. Gotta get back to. Yeah, we don't have anybody online with their hand raised.
Okay, so that closes the public comment portion of this. This seems pretty straightforward to me. It's clearly a use that's in need. Sounds like they've already got people signed up. And I think, you know, the change isn't a very big one. If what we're saying is that it's not a full change to C2, it's a basically a provision for just this use. So I think it seems pretty clear cut to me unless there are others who feel differently.
So based on the foregoing discussion and the testimony heard today, I recommend that we recommend approval of the proposed zone change to the city council with the following condition. That there should be a footnote added to the map to limit the lot to the use and dimensional regulations of the R3 zone plus daycare center. 12 or more children, inclusive of auxiliary play yards and parking accessory to that use.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. We'll go through Noel.
Aye.
Miguel. And I say aye.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay, that brings us to item number 3, case number 25013MI for 327 Elmwood Avenue, the minor land development.
Madam Chair, I'll give a quick introduction while the applicant's getting set up. So we've seen a few proposals for this site and the applicant's here with a request, and they're proposing to build a 59-foot tall, 5-story mixed-use building with commercial use on the ground floor and 44 residential units. Now, you will see in their presentation, they are requesting a dimensional adjustment for the height, which exceeds the 50-foot, 4-story limit of the C2 zone. And we should also mention that all of these units are gonna be affordable. And in addition, they're also requesting a design waiver from the depth of building entrances. So, yeah, they can tell you more about the project as well as their adjustments and waivers.
Is there someone who's going to present?
It's coming.
Okay,
So he's gonna project using the Zoom feature
Yes.
that we discussed?
yeah.
Okay, maybe while he's getting that going, I can at least introduce us. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, introduce your team, yeah.
I am Charlie Thomas Davison. I'm the Director of Real Estate Development at Women's Development Corporation, located at 861 Broad Street in Providence, and we are the applicant. In case for those who don't know, WDC has been working for 45 years as a nonprofit 501c3 affordable housing developer and property manager, primarily in Rhode Island and some in Southeast Massachusetts. I have with me our architect, Brandon Herr from Union Studio Architecture, based in Providence, Rhode Island. And for those of you who don't know the quality and thoughtfulness of their work, they're a leader in the space of architecture and community design and have extensive experience in the design of affordable housing. I also have with
me, our senior project manager at WDC, Tyler McMillan. We are here, as Choyan stated, for a minor land development review for our project that is in development called 327 Elmwood, located at 327 Elmwood Avenue in Providence. In particular, we are here to request dimensional adjustment for building height and number of stories, as well as design waiver for the depth of building entrances. Brendan will cover those more technical items later in the presentation. I know you all have the staff report and our design submission in front of you. I believe you do. So, I'll be brief, but I want to walk you through the project description, floor plan, site plan, and describe the program of the building. And then I'll turn it over to Brendan to describe design, material choices, and the more technical discussion around the adjustments that we're requesting. Can we go to the next slide? So if you're not familiar with the location at 327 Elmwood, it's at the corner of Elmwood and Burnett. The site is approximately 9,500 square feet, currently vacant, with all the previous structures having been demolished some time ago. The lot is zoned C2. The surrounding area includes the adjacent parking lot above, which is owned by one of our colleagues at West Elmwood, another nonprofit, as well as a building that's been repurposed for MAP, like a rehab, social service type operator. And then, otherwise commercial 1-story on Elmwood, and then residential housing on the smaller streets. Hold on, can you go to the next slide? The project proposal proposes to create 44 rental housing units, all of which will be affordable to people at 80% AMI or less. As mentioned, the building is proposed to be 5 stories, with the bulk of the residential units on the upper 4 identical floors. This is notable as it is in fact why we're requesting the dimensional variance for height and number of stories. It's critical to the development pro forma and financing that we have no less than 40 units to make it pencil out. And so effectively without the 5th story, we're unable to develop the project. The ground floor, as you can see in yellow, does include 4 residential units, but is otherwise dedicated to commercial space as required on Elmwood, just over 1,700 square feet, as well as those items in blue, which are tenant amenities. Those include, an amenity room, which is like a community room for events, as well as a management office, so an on-site property management, mail room, other small offices for resident services, as well as shared space for social service providers that will be part-time in the building to serve the clients. I think, on-site laundry as well. Notable is the size of the bike room. I think, we'll get to that later, but as mentioned in the staff report, we far exceed the minimum requirement of 9 bike spaces and are proposing 22 spaces, partly to meet the requirement of Rhode Island Housing, one of our primary funders, but also in acknowledgement of having no parking and the encouragement by the city even of people to, use public transportation and bicycles. The table here, which will be repeated on the next slide as well, does show you the unit breakdown, where you'll see that we have 20 studio apartments averaging 380 square feet, 21 bedroom apartments averaging 650 square feet, and 4 2-bedroom apartments at around 900 square feet proposed for the property. Let's see, the building is served by an elevator, clearly. And again, I already noted the social service and resident service offices on site. This is also our site plan. I think notably it's a bit of a postage stamp. So we're kind of, maxing out the site here. Another reason we're here. And so on here, just to point out things that we'd normally see on the site plan, on the lower left, you can see there's a trash area. That will be small dumpsters that our management folks will put out to the street at the time of trash pickup, or our private trash service will wheel out. We have a generator in case of power loss, primarily to operate the elevator and, other lighting. There's a resident garden here. I mean, there's not a lot of space, but this is to give some private space for the residents outside, which I think will come up again as we talk about the need for the recessed residential entry, where it says entry vestibule. Part of that is to, create a kind of defensible space, I guess, for the residents to separate it from commercial traffic and street traffic. There's minimal space here, but we've landscaped it to the degree that we can. And, have, they're in your package are actually some proposed species and other things, which, I'm not gonna go into today, but, we have put consideration into. It's noted in the, staff report that we're exceeding the 15% canopy coverage, significantly. And that is primarily done by the use of street trees, which we understand and accept is our responsibility to maintain. As we're using them for our canopy coverage, they are our responsibility. And so I just want to make sure that you knew that we also acknowledge that. There is no parking required nor provided as the lot is less than 10,000 square feet. But again, we're providing quite a few bicycle parking spaces. These are, we're meeting the stormwater requirements. You have our civil package in front of you, but just to highlight a couple of things, the roof runoff will be directed to the city sewer. Surface water will be managed with pervious pavers. And the combination of these features will result in a reduction from the existing condition. We go to the upper floor. So as I mentioned, there's 4 identical floors above. So we just have a typical floor shown here, a mix of studio, 1 bed and 2 bed to kind of meet our understanding of the market and also to fit in the building. So, each of them, even the studio, I mean, sometimes it's hard to tell when you look at a studio, but they're, full-size beds. I mean, they're pretty generous. They meet all the requirements of Rhode Island housing and building code, of course. Wanna maybe move on to the rendering. So Brendan's gonna go more into materials and get a look at some of the elevations, which also, and again, at the plans, which will discuss the setbacks and such. But I just wanted to point out it's kind of an interesting corner to be on. We've attempted to address the signage from, all directions, understanding, that traffic's coming from both directions on Elmwood. We are, working through how to best identify, proper signage to denote the residential from the commercial and remain flexible for who the commercial tenant may be, since we don't yet have that selected. And the wooden fence that you see there, that's that tenant's patio area, resident garden, again, pulled back off the street so as to clearly denote a private space from what otherwise might be a busy sidewalk. I think everything else Brendan can cover. I don't know if this is necessary, but I heard others doing it. I mean, Brendan is a registered architect and from Union Studio Architecture, and that he would be recognized as an expert in the field of architecture. I think he's an expert.
Thank you all. I'll go through some more images and then we can discuss the requested adjustments. This is the Elmwood Avenue elevation. You see we're requesting 59 feet of height and 5 stories, 2 adjustments there. The building occupies almost the entire frontage on Elmwood, only the 5 feet of the side yard that we're pulling off the adjacent property. The building wraps the corner down Burnett Street. Elmwood is a designated main street, so it has the additional requirements. Materials, our preliminary decisions on materials are masonry brick at the ground floor, composite or cementitious cladding at the upper floors. The intention is for this to be a type 2 steel construction building, not a type 5 wood construction. So that will have some implications on the design. Steel columns need to be accommodated, whereas instead of light wood framing. This is the side street, Burnett Street. The lot is kind of a trapezoid shape, so you see the Elmwood Ave kind of receding off to the right. We have the courtyard, semi-courtyard on the left side with fencing. You see the proposed street trees six of them, I believe. Oh, yeah, I think 6 street trees and then 2 on the parcel, I think. Some fencing to kind of shield the trash enclosure, the residence garden, the generator, which we almost certainly have to provide, but we're exploring that still. These are the 2 other elevations, the western and the northern on the left. And looking again at the rendering from the main corner at Elmwood and Burnett, like Charlie said, yeah, you can see the building from this angle. This is the kind of the view down Burnett. You see the residential entry recess underneath the bulk of the building. This is kind of a close-up of that recess entry. We're proposing that the commercial entry at the corner also be somewhat recessed. And then I have 2 slides about the adjustments that we're requesting. I can either talk through them really quickly, or if you have any questions specifically about the adjustments requested, happy to answer them.
Why don't you present them quickly and we'll hear more about it from the staff report.
Yeah, the first one highlighted in red on the right-hand table deals with the 9-foot height adjustment and the additional story. I think Charlie explained, that was the program of the building to meet the to make the funding and finances of the project work to go to that number of units. We needed that additional story. Our front setbacks, our side setback, corner side setback, we're all in compliance. And then the rear setback, I know Bob and Choyan, you said that this may be moved due to zoning changes, but I left it in as an adjustment request because I wasn't sure if they had been implemented yet or not. Because we're abutting in our district, we would normally be required to provide a 20-foot rear setback.
Yeah, that's not the case anymore. It's
Okay.
10 feet, so you
Okay.
don't need it.
Okay, so that's no longer an adjustment request, we're in compliance with that. And then that's just at the bottom, you see that's just our average existing grade calculation. Oh, right, because Elmwood is a designated main street, residential use is prohibited on the ground floor within 20 feet of the front property line. The closest our residential use is on the ground floor is 23 feet. Additional. The build to percentage requirement for the front lot line on Elmwood is 60%. We're providing 91% if we include the corner recess entry. So that's not an adjustment request, but on the side street, we're required 40%. And the bulk of the building covers 41% of that, but on the ground floor, we do have these 2 recess entries. The corner entry for the commercial, we're just barely out of compliance with the minimum, or the maximum allowed depth. The residential entry, we're a good bit in excess of the allowed depth. The allowed depth is 6 feet for a recessed entry. We are requesting 16.5 feet recess entry depth. Yeah. So I think that covers our adjustment request.
All right, commissioners, do you have any questions? I think we're all set. You guys are welcome to sit down. We can hear the staff report.
Laura, thanks, Madam Chair. So the applicant just went through their plans for the building, and we do concur with their findings that the use of the building as well as the dimensions and site design in addition to parking, landscaping, lighting, and drainage, all conform to the zoning ordinance as outlined in the staff report. So from there, we can move to the design waivers that they talked about. You're required to make findings in accordance with section 10005E of the development review regulations. And we find that the applicant, and we are able to make positive findings with the criteria that literal enforcement of the provision for which the waiver sought is impracticable. And as you can see, they are trying to address the diagonal corner as well as they've made a design decision for Burnett Street. This waiver will not have any adverse impacts on properties outside of the lot, and we do find that this would be in the interest of good planning practice. And moving on to their dimensional adjustment, again, you'd have to make findings in conformance with section 10005B of the development review regulations. We find that they meet the eligibility criteria of providing mixed use with over 50% dedicated to housing, as well as through provision of affordable housing. And the ordinance does say that we can grant the height adjustment that they're seeking. And as discussed, provision of mixed use as well as affordable housing are reasonably related to the condition that makes the project eligible for the adjustment. So based on that, we can say that this project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, given that they are located under the neighborhood commercial land use designation, and they conform to objective H2 of the plan, which encourages creation of new housing. As discussed, they are in compliance with the use, dimension, parking, landscaping, and lighting requirements of the ordinance. We don't foresee a negative environmental impact. This is a buildable lot with street access provided from Elmwood Ave and Burnett Street. So based on that, we would recommend that you approve the dimensional adjustment, finding conformance with section 10005B of the development review regulation, that you vote to grant the design waiver, finding that it would be in the interest of good planning practice and design. And finally, we ask that you vote to approve the preliminary plan, subject to these conditions, that the stormwater management plan be subject to the city engineer's approval, the planting of the street trees be subject to the city forester's approval, and the applicant be responsible for their maintenance. Any required encroachment permit shall be submitted at the permitting stage. And finally, we ask that final plan approval be delegated to DPD staff.
All right. So we have three things in front of us. Oh, sorry. Got that stuff. So is there anyone, I know, sorry. Is there anyone in the room here to speak on this issue? Love says no. Is there anyone in our virtual world who is here? No. Okay, then public comment is closed. All right, so three things to vote on. I think the first one is fairly simple, unless you guys disagree, but we often see projects that give us one thing for extra height, and this project has given us two things. And the second thing is affordable housing, which we also don't see that often. So, I think, you know, in terms of what they're giving back to the community for that extra 9 feet, it seems like a good deal.
Okay. I actually have a question. It's a great project. When they submit these, they have 44 units at 80% AMI and below. Do we know if there's the mix of 60, 40, 30% AMI? I'm just curious if that's something that comes up, because that's where the need becomes most acute. I'm just asking the question.
I don't know the answer. They could probably answer that. My understanding with a lot of these projects is that well, it's beyond me. Maybe the applicant can answer the question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, The project would be a mix of 30, 50 likely, and definitely 60% and 80%. We use a technique called income averaging when we include the 80% units. The tax credit regulation requires that they average at no more than 60%. So we tend to shoot for something slightly safer, like 58% as an average. So for every, 80, you have to kind of offset it with a 30. So there is a little bit of kind of a moving target on that, but the answer, I guess, is yes, and otherwise they wouldn't be eligible for low-income housing tax credits on those units. That mix probably isn't totally nailed down, and that might be what Bob was thinking, because it kind of moves as we begin to, further develop the pro forma. Thank you. Is there another question?
I have one question while you're sitting up there. In terms of the plan for the transformer, generator, and trash area, and I don't know if you want to step back up too, sorry. So I assume those are fairly preliminary plans and just sort of holding space for those items. But do you want to talk a little bit? I mean, they're right on the street. Obviously, they're fenced, but they're going to be somewhat visible. So I guess my question is, can you talk a little bit about the fencing materials maybe, and then also just in terms of how the trash area is managed and what that's going to look like?
Yeah, thank you. The transformer is where it is because those have to be located on a public way. And putting it on Elmwood's not an option. The generator, if we have to provide one, has to be next to the transformer. And then the trash also has to be on the public way. So we're really stuck with where they have to be. Fencing, I know there are height limits and like setback of fencing related to height that we have to comply with. And then also Burnett being it being a corner side setback or frontage, there are specific fencing requirements to that, which we will comply with.
Okay.
And then I know your second part of the question was about management of it. And so I'm not sure if I made this clear or not, but we also are a property manager and we manage everything we've ever developed and then third-party manage for others. So we have a lot of experience with trash. And so when I was mentioning the rollout smaller dumpsters, I mean, that's primarily because of, the location. It doesn't work with the larger one that the truck picks up. So what we have in our other properties is a wheel out kind of deal. There's still, dumpsters. And then we have private service. Those will be sized ultimately, I mean, to fit, but also to meet the demand. And if there were a need for 2 trash pickups a week because of the size of the dumpster and that's what we would kind of contract for that. So that's not quite yet determined, but that's how we've done it in other times. So more pickups if you have, limited in size of dumpster. And then it's either the sanitation people or our own property management who wheel it in and out, but that gets done, as part of that effort.
Okay.
Oh, one more thing. The trash enclosure will most certainly be like a type board wood fence, or it could be metal or it could be composite or something. But as far as the generator and transformer, we're definitely open to a combination of fencing and landscaping to screen those from both the street and from the sort of residence garden that we're proposing.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, just curious, did you ever consider going one more story higher? For
We
real?
actually
I'm joking.
did, and that there was a previously approved project that was 6 stories on this site.
Yeah.
I know that it triggered a couple of other, not only planning review requirements, but also constructability issues, which we kind of quickly priced out and thought that it didn't financially make sense. I mean, I know there's a need for housing, and so I mean, that would be an interest, but we're working closely with our contractor who's already engaged with the project. So we're able to get real-time input from him on constructability and timing and all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of where we landed. I don't remember exactly what okay. Yeah.
I had a question on the upper story, especially on the views from the back. It looks pretty straight and like there's pretty flat. I was wondering if there's any thoughts about making that a little bit different, aside from the materials.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely thought about on the north facade, which is pretty visible because there's a parking lot there. Modulating that, yeah, and it's definitely something we'll explore. Yeah, we're aware of that, 80 or 85 foot long, currently straight shot facade.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna throw out there, given that you're building this out of steel, I don't see the cost of one extra story being that prohibitive. I'm just saying from a contractor perspective, that if it was a podium, I could see that, but I'm just asking.
Yeah, I wish the contractor was here. Yeah.
Fair enough. I'm just.
There are building code issues. We get awfully close to high rise construction at 6 stories. With our 40 to 44 unit, performa, we were kind of at the sweet spot of where we needed, like the amount of floor area we needed at 5 feet. WDC definitely priced it out, ran it through the performa about adding another story, another 8 to 10 units, and you concluded you wanted to stick at 5.
I think, you know, I mean, it's always a little bit of a guessing game, but there's also kind of a right size for funding. And you know, it's sort of a gut instinct sometimes on how much is too much, and we're trying to fund this, you know, quickly and build it quicker than our typical developments. And so we're threading a needle, but I mean, you make a good point. I think it's worth maybe going back and inquiring with the contractor too, what those issues were, but, because I forgot, but I think it was, I'm thinking about the podium.
All right. Got all of our questions for them. All right, you guys are welcome to sit down. Okay, so given that they have proposed a 5-story building, I think that's probably where we are for tonight. And it sounds like, given that we are suggesting maybe they should be proposing a 6-story building, that 5 stories seems okay. Yeah, right. Okay, so I think. Yeah, okay. So I think the first thing we need to vote on is this dimensional adjustment. I think, we could entertain a motion to grant the dimensional adjustment, finding that the applicant meets the criteria for dimensional adjustments in 1904E of the ordinance, and having made positive findings in conformance with section 1005B of the DRR, development review regulation.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Noel,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Miguel,
Aye.
and I say aye. So that brings us to the design waiver. So basically the recessing of the building entrances. If we're talking about best design and planning practices, I think there is something nice about addressing the corner, and I actually think the move to recess the entrance, the main residential entrance, creates a nice relationship with both the garden and the management office, and that the management office gets eyes on the entrance and sort of more engagement with the entrance. So to me, that actually seems like a positive move. I'm curious what you guys, if there are further thoughts on that.
Concur. Assessment.
Okay. So, we could make a motion to grant the design waiver for the proposed width of building entrances, finding that they are in the interest of good planning, practice, and design.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Noel,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Miguel,
Aye.
and I say aye. Okay, so lastly, the preliminary plan. Are there any comments on the overall plan? I think, they've addressed a much of, what's on the table here in terms of stormwater and plantings. That would be further reviewed through the design process, and, I think we could entertain a motion to grant the preliminary plan subject to the conditions in the staff report,
Including the findings.
including the findings and subject to the conditions in the staff report.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, go through Noel,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Miguel,
Aye.
and I say aye.
Good luck. Motion to adjourn?
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? All
Aye.
right.